Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be exploring the 13th of Bach's 15 two-part inventions, just to discover something about what he does with texture. So this is the two-part invention in A minor that goes something like this. So on. Okay, well, let's have a little think about what Bach is doing here, because you notice we have this wonderful conversation going on between the hands. And people often say to me when they're feeling the need to write in two parts, or maybe they've got to do some kind of exercise or study for a course they're on in two parts. Oh my goodness, how do you write a meaningful piece of music when you've only got two parts? Give me four parts and I'm away, but just two parts, it sounds a bit rubbish. I've got one note here, one note there. Well, look at this, listen to this, and you soon discover something about how to do it. Essentially, if we look at what's going on here, Bach has got two ideas rolling. One idea is presented in semiquavers, 16th notes. The other idea is presented in quavers, in eighth notes. So let's just have a little look at how this ticks. Well, you notice the right hand kicks off with this. And immediately that's done, what does the left hand do? But it copies it. What happens next? Well, the right hand has another crack at it. And then, believe it or not, the left hand has another crack at it. So if somebody said to you, well, look, the first thing to think about is if you're going to write something in two parts, come up with an idea and state it 4 times, you'd probably be thinking, well, that sounds a bit tedious, a bit repetitive, a bit predictable. But when you hear it in this, you don't kind of get that impression, do you? That's because of what else is going on around it, because Bach is pretty strict about the use of this semiquaver, this 16th note figure at the beginning, isn't he? And around that, he has this secondary idea, which is this notion of these quavers or eighth notes. So when the left hand's busy with our primary figure, the right hand just breaks into these quavers, or these eighth notes. They're quite disjunct, aren't they? They kind of leap around. And that's interesting in itself, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Then when the right hand picks up on that, well, the left hand goes into these quavers, these eighth notes, but it's not the same pattern. So even though the semiquaver figure, the 16th note figure, is repeating itself precisely, the quaver figure, the eighth note figure, is discernible as the second idea, but the notes are not repeating themselves precisely. So there's an element of repetition, the 4 things coming back to back. Alongside that, you've got something which is kind of recognizable as the second idea, but melodically is different. And this time it's just shortened. We've just got those 2 notes and then he calls it a draw. And at the beginning, of course, he puts this little syncopated thing in, which is just an interesting thing to put underneath the first statement of the semiquavers or the 16th notes in the right hand, just to give us a little bit of focus on the left hand, a bit of rhythmic energy, the syncopation kind of slightly drawing attention to the left hand. You see how that goes. There are different ways in which you might play this. One is what I've just done, which is that you essentially play the semiquavers or the 16th notes legato, and you play the 8th notes or the quavers détaché. So you get a difference between the 2 ideas, and so your articulation is clarifying the internal structure of the piece. It's just one way of doing it. I said I'd come back to this kind of thing about disjunct movement. There's quite a bit of it here actually, because even in this semiquaver 16th note idea, this is pretty disjunct as well. So Why does Bach write such a disjunct piece? I mean, often a melody has a balance, doesn't it, between conjunct movement, notes moving by step, and disjunct movement when we're leaping around. Here we're kind of leaping all over the landscape. And if you've got too many leaps in a piece of music, sometimes it sounds really kind of disjointed and it becomes difficult to listen to because we kind of lose any sense of what the melodic line is. Bach has this ingenious ability to write lots of disjunct movement, but to present a melodic line that you can follow. You can follow this. It's a very kind of singable line, isn't it? But of course, another thing he's doing is showing us how to write very effectively in a two-part texture so that the listener is almost hearing something in more than two parts. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, if we just look at this for a moment, these four quavers, these eighth notes, because we're leaping, if you're leaping, you're usually leaping to another note of a chord, aren't you? If you're using inessential notes, non-chord tones, you're moving by step. But if you're leaping like this, C to E, well, actually C to E are two notes of the tonic chord of A minor. What's the left hand doing at the same time? A, E, A, C. That's spelling out the chord of A minor, isn't it? So we're only in two parts, aren't we? But actually, when you look at all those notes combined, we've got all these notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So within that beat, there are 5 different pitches sounding, all spelling out a chord of A minor in its second inversion. When we look at what's happening on the next beat, this is all spelling out chord 5, 7 in A minor. And actually, again, there are 5 notes there, aren't there? E, B, D, G sharp and E. So we've got these 2 threads running in the counterpoint, but harmonically, the disjunct movement is all working together to fill out chords. So we're in 2 parts, but we're hearing a 5-part chord, a 5-part chord, and then we go on to hear a 4-part chord of the tonic chord. Then we go on to hear this. This is a kind of another 5-part chord, a dominant 7th again. And then we're coming back to another 5-part chord, which is the tonic chord again. So you see how you can write in 2 parts and yet imply a really full, sometimes 5-part texture. Isn't that a rather clever thing that he does? So it's the combination of all this that is making this really inventive. Added to which, you notice in the beginning here, we were just thinking for a moment, well, he's just thrown this in the left hand to fill up the first 2 beats before he gets going on this stuff. And okay, it's filling out some harmony, that's chord 1, but he's also managed to put a suspension in the bass there. Do you hear that suspension? So there's another point of interest that he throws into the mix. So why does it actually work so well in 2 parts without particularly sounding as if it's limited to 2 parts? We've got the conversation going in the texture, the semiquavers, the 16th notes bouncing around like this between the parts. We've got the quavers, the 8th notes, kind of working in sync with that. So whichever part is not doing the semiquavers or the 16th notes is doing the quavers or the 8th notes. Then we've got this whole thickening out of the harmony through the disjunct movement of the 2 lines. And then we've just managed to throw in a syncopation and a suspension for good measure. That's why we're not thinking, oh my goodness, this is really limited by only having 2 voices. And we're not thinking, this is really tedious because it's repeated the same idea 4 times. Have a listen to how it fits together. And so it goes on. But you notice harmonically, there's nothing terribly complicated going on. What's happening so far? Chord 1, chord 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1. So he's just alternating tonic and dominant chords. Here's Bach, who we often cite as the great composer, being able to do all this wonderful stuff harmonically. Actually, he's keeping life fairly straightforward, isn't he? Well, obviously, you can't keep repeating the same thing. So we've had the same thing 4 times in the 16th notes, the semiquavers. So we have to go somewhere else. So what does he do next? Well, here we get the next interjection of semiquavers or 16th notes. Okay, that's recognizable, isn't it, as what we had before, but the notes have changed and the pattern has sort of been inverted, isn't it? Not entirely an inversion of the whole thing, but it's a sort of inversion of the pattern. Then the left hand comes in. Now, what do we notice about that? It's the same as the thing the right hand has just played, but it's a fifth lower. So you see what we're doing now is not just repeating something at the same pitch. We're saying, okay, here's something that's sort of inverted and manipulated a bit, and then we'll have it in the left hand, but this time at a different pitch, and it's exactly a compound fifth lower. Okay, so then what happens? Well, it goes back into the right hand, but what's happening this time? Well, isn't that the same as this, but it's gone down a note? Then what's the left hand doing? Well, isn't this the same as what we had up here, but it's gone down a note? And then what does the right hand do? Well, we get in here and you think, oh, it's going down a note. But he stops, he garrots it after the first few notes. And the left hand, oh, that's been garroted as well. So then the right hand has the shortened version. Then the left hand has the shortened version. Then the right hand has the shortened version. And then the left hand has the shortened version to finish into that cadence. So you hear what he's doing now. He's kind of truncated the idea, hasn't he? So everything's now moving at a sort of quicker pace between the hands. It's kind of adding to the excitement of it. So when we hear it from here, we've now got this. So isn't it interesting how he's managed to keep going with that semi-quaver idea, the 16th note thing, and the quaver idea, the 8th note thing, kept the conversation alternating between the hands, used a lot of disjunct movement to fill out the harmony, and then he's used the idea, having stated it 4 times, now kind of uses it with different transpositions, uses it a bit sequentially, and then truncates it. So we have this kind of feeling of driving towards the cadence, because this is your first main cadence in C major. And so he goes on. We could examine the rest of it, but you can see just by looking at the next bit, this is the original thing, but this time in C major. Then the left hand does it. Then the right hand does it. Then the left hand gets into this sort of modified inversion thing. And then the right hand copies that. Then the left hand copies it. Then the right hand copies it. Then guess what? The left hand copies it. And then the right hand copies it. Notice we're on the move. We're going through some different keys now. We started off in C major there. We've modulated to G major down here. We've gone to E minor over here. And then he kind of truncates everything again. And we get a little bit more kind of sandwiching of the 2 parts together. There are still some of these quavers around, but this time with ties. But sometimes both hands are playing these semi-quavers together as well. So for the next cadence in E minor, we have a further way of kind of compacting material to give us the excitement leading up to the next cadence. So it's quite clever the way he's organised this, isn't it? First section up to that C major thing, and then the next section up to this E minor cadence. And you see how he takes these ideas, pushes them in some new way, but it becomes more compact towards the first cadence, does the same thing towards the next cadence, but this time both hands kind of more tangled up in the texture. But the conversation keeps going. The padding out of the harmony keeps going as we keep spelling out chords and having 4 and 5 part chords. And we also get key movement to kind of generate something new happening. So it's fascinating to think what he's doing melodically, lots of disjunct movement. What he's doing rhythmically, really making the most of 2 ideas, but having that syncopation at the beginning with the suspension, using some of these tied notes that we've just sort of hinted at as well, just as some little variation on that fundamental pattern, but essentially just 2 rhythmic ideas. And then building the harmony through all of this, finding ways of repeating material, using materials sequentially, transposing ideas, hinting at inversion of the ideas, compacting things in different ways towards the cadences. These are all things that make this kind of 2-part texture thing really engaging. So next time you're thinking, oh, I've got to write something in 2 parts, but it's going to be boring. Don't make it boring. Think about this and think, oh, is there something I could take to this? You don't have to write in Baroque style, but you might want to lift something out of this approach to writing in 2 parts in a way that keeps your texture alive, really interesting, and keeps the listener completely engaged. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me invite you to some of the Bach resources on our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. Click on courses, you'll find a Bach chorale course, for example. You'll also find an analysis course of a Bach Prelude and Fugue in F-sharp minor from the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier. There are other things on Bach on there as well that you might find quite engaging and useful follow-up from what we've been talking about in this video. So that's www.mmcourses.co.uk.